Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this edition of BookBytes Season 7. I'm your host, Shafinaaz Hassim. On the literary front, we've had a fantastic week, both the Franschhoek Literary Festival earlier this week and yesterday in Johannesburg, we were at the Kingsmead Book Festival, which was filled with amazing panels and lots of literary activity. I think everyone's just raring to go, knowing that things are in a way opening up. There's so many new books out there, and it was just awesome just being able to listen to in-person conversations. And today's guest is a very special guest, a multi-award-winning multi-journalist, a veteran photojournalist, print journalist, and radio journalist, Mr. Fakir Hassen. Needs little introduction on the scene, but I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't give full appreciation. He's been involved in education, broadcasting, and journalism for the past 47 years, a true media legend in our midst. He taught at Bree Street Primary School in Fordsburg for 4 years at the start of his career, and worked for several print media for another 4 years. He started full-time work at the SABC as a chief sub-editor in the radio news division in 1982. He went on to head the full-time service for South African Indian listeners, Radio Lotus, where he was station manager for a decade. And before being tasked to start up the first educational radio service for the corporation, he then worked in the office of the chief operating officer at the SABC. He assisted with merging separate television and radio education departments at the SABC Education Department, served as head of broadcast compliance. His tasks there were designated complaints officer with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, handled some of the compliance code of conduct for Broadcasting Complaints Commission, and served as commissioner on the first South African Commission for UNESCO. And I could go on and on reading what is rather an abridged CV. But what I want to do is we will get into Uncle Fakir's more than 27 publications. Let me welcome him to the show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uncle Fakir, welcome to BookBytes, and Jazakallah khair for giving us your time this evening.
Jazakallah to you, and Assalamu alaikum to you and the listeners. Good evening. And
It's so wonderful.
You can stop with the CV bit now, because your check is in the mail already, so and it's enough.
Oh, Jazakallah. We'll keep that in mind. But more than anything, I think immense gratitude to you for the inspiration that you give to us, younger practitioners in the media across the board. And you do it with so much of grace and humility. May we all learn, may we take a page out of the way in which you have presented your career and the way you continue to do so. And I also want to make a quick dua to say that may Allah grant you barakah in all that you do.
Ameen, Jazakallah, Safina.
So tell us right from the outset, there's a list of awards also that you've received, which we'll get to. Hopefully they give us another few minutes to be able to read all the awards. But where did it start from? Your inspiration, what catapulted your journey into journalism?
Well, I've always been, at school, I used to enjoy writing essays and so on. And one of the first things I wrote was in Afrikaans called Memoir, which was published in the school magazine. And you know what? After COVID, some bit of COVID fog hit in. I couldn't remember this. I just didn't remember it. And my friend Ismail Abramji, one day I visited him, and he pulled out this magazine from the Pretoria Indian Boys High School, which I attended when I finished matric many years ago. And there it was, May Haunt by dear Fakir Hassen. And that was the first time probably that I had something actually in print. And can you imagine, I've forgotten all about it. And Ismail had a good guffaw about it, and I made sure he gives me a photocopy, because even I didn't have that at that time. And then it just went on. And then, of course, I was, after leaving teaching, I worked for the Fiat Lux magazine. You might be too young to remember, but in those days we had separate departments for for different communities in South Africa. There was a Department of Indian Affairs, and they were publishing the Fiat Lux magazine. So it was actually a kind of privilege to be able to, at that time, record the contemporary history of that time, of all the communities in the old Transvaal province. And in fact, that's where I first met your dad when you were still teaching in Petersburg. He guided me around Nirvana on my first visit there. And there was I used to take pictures and interview some of the people of the town, the pioneers, and so on, and record how they'd been obviously forced out of the CBDs and so on, and had the new shopping centers built, etc. So there was a whole series of articles again, which I don't have, and I've been trying to find the archives in the old University of Durban, Westville. Somewhere there is some. I need to find those things. Because it's a long story about how my own copies, which kept accurately, everything I wrote, I kept a copy of. But it's a long story, but they were thrown away by uh, by a close family member who was around 90 at the time. And what do you tell the old man who says to you in Gujarati, "Eto bada juna kagarya hota." It's old papers that you never used for so many years. And while we were gone to Durban for 10 years, he threw it out of the garage and turned it into a room and a cottage to let out. I cried on that day because I also had amongst them a stamp collection which my late father had started, which was almost as high as a telephone directory of Johannesburg at that time, and to which I had added. I don't even know what value it would have had. I never valued it. And he threw that out as well because he said, all the in Gujarati, he said to me, all the stamps said they were marked, they were used, they were of no use, you can't use them again. And he never thought about why did I have them classified by different countries and so on. But anyway, nothing can do about that now. But all my early work destroyed, thrown away.
Oh,
So
and
yeah, sad.
I was looking at parts of some of the books that I have of yours, and I thought, firstly, you already referred to that you worked at a time for the magazine that during the apartheid times was able to cover so much of the different communities. That's commendable. But you've kept such a precise and careful archive, because if you look at all your publications in the last decade, they all have it's like you've got material you can go to and then just put it into a manuscript, another lot of material that can go into a manuscript. So what you're doing is very this historical archiving of material, of your photographs, of different themes, like whether it's the Bollywood collection or the Gandhian collections, is extremely worthy of celebration. And so it's a pity that you say that so much has been lost as well.
Yes, rather unfortunate. In fact, I do have a sizable archive. Yes, but besides that error, there are two other errors which of my material which got destroyed. One was where I kept all the old black and white photographs, which I used to take myself and even process the film in those days. With the Lenasia Times, we used to month end, we used to darken the bathroom in the flat where it was produced, and I had all the equipment, and we'd actually develop and print the film so that we have those photographs. In those days, there were no computers, so we had to physically size the pictures, send them away, get a size back, etc. And all those things also, and the negatives were retained. And again, there was a family member within the Lenasia Times who found this whole box of negatives, which the late Wade, who started the paper, and I had painstakingly kept all these years, thinking one day they will be of use. And certainly they would have been for my publications because a lot of contemporary history in those on those negatives. And again, she threw them away because they got a bit wet somewhere with the rain leakage. I managed to salvage a few of them, but very very few. Then I did a very silly thing I lost about 10 years of work, which I managed to recover some from backups, but not all. And that was because I kept my backup hard drive connected to the same PC all the time. Never removed it. And when I was living in Mayfair, we had a power surge one year which destroyed everything in the whole area, with all my neighbors and everything, air cons, garage doors, fridges, stoves, etc. And my computer literally burned. The whole hard drive was burned black. And with it, I thought, never mind, I've got a backup. The backup drive was also burnt. So I paid somebody 2,000 rand supposedly to get back as much as they can without any guarantee, and they recovered 31 pictures for me out of probably 500,000 pictures on that drive. So what I started doing was looking at little bits of old backups, emails, etc., and I'd get them back. But the thing is, if I go back to emails which would send to the newspapers I worked with. So in there, usually there would be one, two, maybe three photographs from an event. But at an event, and you've seen me photograph things at an event, I'd probably take hundreds of photographs because digitally it doesn't cost you anything. And they say one day some of these will come into use, and when they did become necessary to use, most of them were not there. So yes, I do have a lot of material, but regret having a lot of material that would have been very useful, which I don't have any longer.
Look, I think it's an important reminder. Technology has changed, but for us to be able to maintain and look after the material that we collect, all of us, and I think families in general collecting special material that's of interest and value to them. Your one of your first books was the Bollywood collection, but I want to speak about your memoir, the first memoir that was Marabastat to Mayfair. That
Mhm.
piqued my interest because there's such important history, especially with the forced relocations of our people and the kind of history and narrative that was lost and gained. Because I think in documenting these stories, we are reclaiming some of our history. Talk to us about that particular publication.
Yes, it started out as it was going to be a family tree book just for the family. Uh, and at the end of the book, my father and his 9 siblings, and we started tracking them down. And this is just from my grandfather's time. He had these 9 siblings, and all of them together. I think by now they probably number into the 400s with the latest generation. And I had to go and visit all of them and find them, get all their details, and then put it into that family tree that I designed there. This was intended just for the family. But I also said maybe I should also write a few chapters about my personal experiences of growing up in Ravastad and my schooling, and etc., and the family connections. And some of the family members said, no, 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 this must be shared with other people. And so my dear friend Semi Naidu of the Apple Print Group, with whom I published all these books, he said, no, let's do a few hundred copies. And then we sent it out. And then what we did was not just the one. Then I did the similar exercise for my wife's side of the family, Zarina Chunara, with her immediate. She just had a father and an uncle, only 2 sons of her grandfather. But even from there, there are a couple of hundreds descendants now. So we did one on that side of the family. And then so that became the second book, Living in Lenasia. I call it the spirited decade because it was very spirited in the 70s when all
Right.
the resistance was happening with the student movements there, with the anti-SAIC, plans and so on. You remember the South African Indian Council was very popular, not popular, but very unpopular, but they were in power, as it were, in the tricameral parliament. And so that became the second book. And then as you hinted at or read out there, I worked at the SABC for 35 years. So the third book was called 35 Years at the SABC. And that's probably my most interesting one that never got published into the public domain widely. So what Sammy did, he said, let's put these 3 books together because you've basically written your biography here, or autobiography. So we released it as an autobiographical trilogy in limited numbers, which some people have, and obviously with our plans always to put these into libraries free of charge. So there are libraries which have these books as well.
So I've got 25 milestones inside 25 years of democracy.
Yes, milestones inside 25 years of democracy. Each time there was a highlight in
Beautiful collection.
yeah, thank you. In our country's history, it provided an opportunity to record the achievements of our community, the Indian community. And I'm not at all ashamed to say that I document mainly the achievements and successes of the Indian community, particularly in the New South Africa, where we never had those opportunities before 94. And our community has used those opportunities not only to better themselves, but also to better the lives of their fellow men, of other communities. And you'll see that throughout my books, you will find how they assisted people, etc. I mean, it's common cause, the story about Judge Zondo, who loves telling it himself, how an Indian shopkeeper led him to where he is today, and he acknowledged it frequently. But there are many stories like that that are untold, and I often go in search of those stories as well. But at the same time, I've been documenting the community activities. I like to refer to myself as a community journalist, a term I coined early in the days with my friend Wade. We said the community wants to know about the dance schools that are running there, what the kids are doing. And I find kids who are now grandparents, whose photos I had taken and published in newspapers, etc., contacting me now and telling me, you know what, you took a picture of my granddaughter dancing at such a school and it's in one of your books there. And if you remember, you took my picture when I was 8 years old and I was dancing at some my Stedford or something. and that gives me quite a thrill to find people coming back like that. And I must be honest, about 50, more than 50% of the time, I can't even remember that I took that picture of the granny at that stage, or the mother maybe. But some I do recall, and then I'm very, very pleased that they recall it.
I think you have a way of making people feel like celebrities. It's so important to document a special occasion, So when that's done, obviously it stands out for people. You also have quite a bit of documentation on. You've got on the Gandhian, the 101 Gandhian inspirations, and recently on the Gandhian Trail. In This was launched in January, right?
Yes, there are actually three books I've done on Gandhi. Now, Gandhi in the apartheid era was never celebrated by government at all. But after Madiba came to power, it took on a completely new meaning. There were new statues put up, there were commemorations of Gandhi. Madiba himself acknowledged Gandhi, the role that Gandhi played in his own development. Although the two had never met, but he read his works, etc. And many other people who were influenced by Gandhi. Now, I want to divert for a moment from the three books on Gandhi. I'm often asked to speak. I'm not a Gandhian expert. That is a terrain of his granddaughter Ila Gandhi and his great granddaughter Kirti Menon here in Johannesburg. They are experts in the family and so on. But I have not even an academic interest. The academics have also written extensively about that. My interest is documenting how the community and government has celebrated Gandhi, particularly after 94. In that context, I had a lot of archival material over the last 25 years or so. And that's how, when the first occasion arose, that's where the book you mentioned there, 101 Gandhian Inspirations. It's called 101 because it was published a year after the centenary of Gandhi's return to India, after having spent his 2 decades in South Africa. And I've been collecting for many, many years things about Tolstoy Farm, about the Phoenix settlement to a lesser degree because that's in Durban. But Tolstoy Farm I've been following from when it was a thriving commune still, after Gandhi had left in the 70s. And from Pretoria, the Jerambai Bana, he's still around, a master sculptor and artist. And he and his family, young family, had been living there at that time. There were apricot trees, I recall, beautiful ones. And then it got vandalized completely. And Mon Hira started reviving it. And now there's this Gandhi Remembrance Committee, which has done wonderful things there. We were due there today, this morning. In fact, there was due to be a walk, and it didn't happen. So that was the first book. So that's why it was called 101. Some of my Gujarati friends remarked that, the Gujarati community has this thing about you don't donate 100 Rand or 1,000 Rand. You always donate Ekso Ek or Ekazar Ek. You must add 1 Rand to your donation. Some sort of philosophy. And they thought that's why the book was called 101. The real reason was it was a year after the centenary. Then there was Gandhi's 150th birth centenary. And again, it was celebrated worldwide, that one. And so there was a second book, a real coffee table book, that one. And then last year in November, the Consul General for India, Anju Ranjan, in Johannesburg, she took 2 busloads on what she called the Gandhian Trail. And we went from Johannesburg to Phoenix, Ladysmith, Dundee, Newcastle. And I thought I'd seen everything there was to know about Gandhi in South Africa, and I didn't, quite honestly. I mean, we went to Heidelberg, for example, and we went to the station where Gandhi had met the local community there. And guess what we see there? Long banner, Gandhi's Ale. Now, the man never used to drink. He was a teetotaler. But here was someone manufacturing a beer, a craft beer, at the station where he had landed, obviously capitalizing on it. And to our surprise, the Indian community in Heidelberg had given permission to this man to do that. So things like that, I look for that, I look for a wagon somewhere that Gandhi might have used. It's lying on a farm somewhere with a small plug that nobody bothers. That this is where Gandhi was bearing stretchers or something like that. The little monuments. There's a small statue at a temple in Ladysmith, tiny, the size of a fist, and they challenge anyone to pick it up with one hand, and if you can take it with you. And it's so heavy, it's solid lead. Nobody could do that. And I have a picture of Anju trying to pick it up. And it's one of the nicest pictures I've taken, I think. So I look for that unusual stuff, even about Gandhi, even about Madiba. As you know, I've done a book on Madiba as well, and his relationship with the Indian community. And I asked people to send their memories and their pictures, and then wrote around that, adding to what I had. So that's a kind of exercise that I enjoy putting together, and also in a style that I hope people would like to read or want to read, unlike an academic book, which is really research, a thorough research, and so on.
But I think historical documentation has to be celebrated, and the way in which you do it is that it's accessible, like you say, to younger readers, because our youth are not remembering enough, or don't have access to the material that that reminds us of the past, of Mahatma Gandhi's role in South Africa, and of many of the activists that have come through our times. And the community commemorations are important as well. So I really enjoyed in January at your launch when you had them speaking about on the Gandhian trial, and the whole process that you went through to visit these towns and to document the individual processes. But especially when, now for your 70th birthday, the launch, congratulations once again, the
Thank
launch
you.
on the commemorative book, 70 Not Out. What an incredible tribute. What an
Thank you.
incredible tribute to the work that you've done, the work that you continue to do, and the amazing sort of accolades just written in people's own words, people from all walks of life who have had the opportunity to encounter the work that you do and the person that you are. Speak to
Thank
us about
you.
this commemorative issue.
Thanks for that. Well, it started almost half as a joke. You see, Semi that I mentioned earlier, my dear friend, he turned 70 last year, and his son Shumalan and I put together a book within a week. And this was a book of pictures I'd taken, or others had taken actually, of us only at our book launches, which at that stage was probably, 24. But there were so many pictures. So Shumalan said, let's put a nice book together as a memory for Dad of all the people he's been with at our book launches. And we did that within a week. So now when my turn came to start reaching 70, Shumalan said, we must do the same exercise for you. So I said, well, we've got a year to do it, so let me start. And I contacted 80 people. So Semi's idea was, you write about the 70 people that have impressed you the most. So I said, that would be easy, Semi, because it's already in all my books there. So we just have to lift out from a different books, but I don't think it would make an interesting book then because it's there already. So I said, why don't we ask those people for their views on their interactions with me over the years, positive, negative, whatever they wish to write, let's put it in. And he said, good idea. So I contacted 80 people in the hope that some of them, who would be keen to write would send something in. And if I don't get enough, then I'll contact the next people. I shortlisted 212 people and I chose the top 80. And I said, I'll move on from 81 if I don't get responses. And to my surprise, every single one of the 80 responded within a week. And I was quite humbled by that. And some of the messages, you've read some of them, are things that I had long since forgotten, as small things that I might have done for them. But yet it proved to them to be so important that they remember it all these years later, which was very, very humbling. And then I said to Semi, now we've got 80 messages, and still going to have a couple of family messages. So how do we shortlist this back to the 70? And Semi read all the messages, and he said, no, no, no. Let's see what happens here. I think we need to include all of them. Now, before I got to talk to Semi, I didn't tell him that other people were contacting me, mutual friends of those who had sent messages in. And they all wanted to contribute and called me and sent me emails and WhatsApp. What's wrong? Why am I not on your list of 80? And I just would say to them, don't worry, send your message. We'll see what we can do. And before I knew it, we had 137 messages. So again, I said to Semi, now what do we do? And Semi said, listen, I've read these messages and there isn't one that we can drop out. So you look for another 3 people on your list, make it an even 140, and then we will put all those messages in. So I said to him, well, I've got a couple of family messages, so it's already just over 140. And that's how the book was born. And you'll recall at one of my launches, I said that I'm very fortunate that I'm probably the only person in the whole world who's at a living memorial for himself. Because that's what it sounds like. I said, in other circumstances, I would have been right up there, if Allah calls me one day, looking down And probably you'll have the same gathering like this where you would be as well. And people like you would be saying nice things about me, and I'd be watching from there, and there would be my family in the front row sitting and crying and listening to all these nice things about me, and me being unable from there to say thank you. So here was what I call a living memorial service. And that's why we deliberately had no speakers, as you know, except for Semi and myself, thanking people basically, because all those messages are in the book itself. And it would have been unfair to single out a few to deliver a message on stage personally. So I'm really, really honored. And if you read the last page of the book, some people would say this is a brag book. And I say, yes, it is. But it's not bragging about myself, it's bragging about my privilege of having had so many friends. That's what I brag about in this book.
I think it's important to realize that for those of us who are celebrating you, to celebrate what has been accomplished while you're around, while we are able to say thank you for the inspiration, for all of your efforts. And I think that's, it's a significant thing to say. I've seen so many memoirs coming out. There's a whole genre of memoirs coming out of this time of pandemic, and it's an encouragement, I think, to more of our elders to write their memoirs, to write their stories, and to present them. And you do it in also in a very humanitarian way. I know that all of your launches include sharing with the underprivileged. You give out you've printed copies for all the libraries. You give out food parcels, and even your sort of fancy, glamorous launches. Friends have received copies. I know with your 100 memories of Madiba, more than 2,000 copies were distributed for free. And so you've got a way of extending yourself now, even through your books, and I really commend you for that. So I wouldn't call
Well,
it perhaps memorial in a sense, but a celebratory journal.
that's how
And
they
we
decided
would
on the
all be
title,
grateful.
Shumalan and Semi. They said celebrating Fakir Hassen. But I must
Right.
tell you that all that is possible because of people like Shumalan and Semi, firstly, for the printing. Then you got Abi Musa, who hosts us every time. We've done more than 60 launches and other events together. And always, always, there's no charge. All the artists who perform there, they all fall over each other to want to be part of our launches, which I'm quite humbled about as well. And you've seen the quality of the artists who perform there. And then the sponsors who make those gifts available, you know, the MCAs and Effectors and many, many others. Broadway Sweets. It might sound simple, but people want a little snack while they're sitting there, and they take the soaps and other things home. And we always have a goodie bag full of it. And this time around, and I dare say this, everyone who attended every one of our launches got a copy of your book. Daughters are diamonds, and I'm getting excellent feedback. I must tell you, Shafinas, from those who are busy reading it. And I'm surprised that quite a few who weren't aware of the book are now aware of it as well and reading it. And one very interesting one, I met a woman who said she has 4 daughters, all married, and she's going to make sure that as soon as she's finished with the book, she's going to pass it on to them. So I had more copies of your book left, a few, just before we finished all of them last week. And so I said to her, it will be my pleasure on behalf of Shafinaz to give you 3 copies for your daughters because you consider it so important. So in one family, there are 4 people who are reading your book at the moment.
Jazakallah so much for that. I think it's really great that we have community support for our work, that the books are getting read and they're getting out there. We have run out of time and we've had a fabulous, fabulous conversation. And I'm so grateful also that we had a chance to listen to your journey. I hope we have another opportunity to chat. And with that, I'm going to say Assalamu alaikum. And may Allah give you barakah in all that you do, Uncle Fakir.
I mean, Jazakallah and Assalamu alaikum.
And with that, we round up this session of Book Bites. We heard from media legend Fakir Hassen, and inshallah next weekend with the next show of Book Bites. Assalamu alaikum wa